Irish Nation, we are back. Our third episode of season 4, our third attempt at trying to get Mike and Brett onto YouTube, which makes me sound like maybe more of a baby boomer than a millennial in my early 30s. But we are venturing into both the traditional audio. So if you're listening to this, same old, we will always be here on our podcast through Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, wherever you get your podcast. We are also moving into the YouTube world for those watching us on the World Wide Web. I've got my second spotted cow. I hope that audio sounded good as it did to me through the microphone.
Crisp.
That's
to
awesome.
me, it sounded, yeah. If you want to describe it as a crispy boy, like when you opened it,
that was a crispy spotted cow right there.
It sounded like your, 10th floor of the Hesburgh Library, cracking open a refreshment. Not that I've ever actually heard that sound before.
I've never done the Hesburgh challenge. Maybe only 2 or 3 times senior year. So we are also in a whirlwind marathon recording year. It's August the 18th. So if you are listening to this later, apologies if we've missed any headlines, but getting through as many of the season previews as we can and start getting content out to our listeners here ahead of kicking things off at Texas A&M.
Yeah, I mean, we're a couple hours in. We just took a break. I actually think that was pretty helpful. I was able to kind of re-energize a little bit. I did a little outfit change here. Nothing too dramatic. I went from a green t-shirt to a green hoodie. Again, it's great to be back into the swing of things. I think with that, we just want to give another reminder on what we're all about. So we're glass half full. We're not here to criticize the players, the coaches, more so than just kind of like technical analyses of what they're doing. We don't like try to pick fights with people on the internet. We're not coming in with hot takes. I'm not going to say that we don't have any takes that aren't a little spicy. Certainly, we're exploring kind of the depths of how extreme Brett wants to go with some of his rants, but I think they're overall very tame compared to like what you might find on some other podcasts. But that's really what we're about. And as I mentioned, we've been on a marathon recording session. We have 2 episodes already that we've recorded, so we'd recommend that you guys check them out. The first one was really focused on the transfer portal, which is a huge element of today's modern college football landscape. So we went deep on that, how it impacted Notre Dame. And then our last segment is it was on the offense. So we went deep into, and again, that's a side of the ball that was really impacted by transfers as well. So we kind of gave our view about what to expect, who's out, who's in, and finally that brings us to where we are for this segment, and that's the defense.
I've never been more excited for a season preview episode than covering this defense. And we could keep this to an all-time shortest Irish Talk episode ever and just stop after saying this is going to be a top 10 defense unless if something cataclysmically goes wrong. And I can't remember being this excited up and down a unit. Like, I am just nitpicking coming up with potential question marks, what if this went wrong or what if someone doesn't pop? We've talked about on our offensive preview, having the offensive line and the wide receiver room kind of in flux, question marks, new coordinator, new quarterback, exact opposite story on defense. The whole band is back together, bringing in RJ Oben to upgrade things on the edge rush, or maybe not upgrade things, but keep things going that we had with, say, Jean-Baptiste a year ago. And as I look back, we were number 10 in SP Plus last year on defense. And I went back to the other top 10 SP Plus units on either side of the ball. And there's not been a ton. You've got the 2020 and 2015 offense, but both of those squads then graduated Ian Book and Deshaun Kaiser. So obvious kind of drop-offs and transitions the next year. Obviously, the 2012 defense that led us to the BCS championship game appearance. I don't really want to call that a competitive game for Notre Dame football against Bama, but a great historic defense that was fun to cheer for. But we graduated Manti Te'o, Zeke Mata, Capron Lewis Moore. Obviously, the Manti catfishing situation, like just everything changed so much going into that 2013 season, where it just kind of felt like we were starting over. Reasons to not be optimistic. Here, we're bringing back a top 10 unit. And pretty much all of the core pieces gets me really excited. Mike, do you want to start by just talking about how were we able to bring back so much of that talent?
Yeah, and before I do that, I want to make a little quick nit on the Deshaun Kaiser. So he didn't graduate the next year because he was around in 2016.
Oh, that's true. Yeah.
He was just he took a big actually the whole team took a big step back.
Yeah,
but Deshaun Kaiser didn't. did not play particularly well that year. But the point still stands. Now, yeah, going on to your question, Brett, I think in terms of how we were able to keep the band back together. So in the modern college football landscape, NIL has become increasingly important. So I think we both believe that this is a net positive. It's good for the players. I think it gives them more opportunities. The downside is sometimes it can lead to, maybe there's some scenarios where some shady characters are kind of getting involved and funneling money in a way that that's not very savory. However, I mean, I would say like that was happening already. It was just below the surface. Now everything's just a bit more above surface. So I think it's a positive. And one of the main reasons for that is what we're seeing at Notre Dame, and that's that these types of players who are really effective at the college level, but maybe not that first or second round pick. Again, good college players, but maybe not a strong NFL player. It makes it a lot easier for them to stick around. It makes it a lot easier to convince them to stay because they can get that NIL check. They might be getting more money that they would actually be getting in the NFL. And then it also gives them an opportunity to do that and hopefully improve their draft stock. So they get to cash in, and then they can also do that while maybe also benefiting their draft stock. So we saw that. We're seeing that hopefully this year with a few guys. So Howard Cross, I think you got to start with him. Just a dominant interior defensive lineman, really, really productive college player. Doesn't project as highly to the NFL. Now we'll see. He's like one of those guys who I wouldn't be totally stunned if once he gets to the NFL, he actually ends up being very productive. But he's someone who we're able to retain, and it's unclear if we would have been able to retain him otherwise if there was no NIL. And someone in his situation, he may have just wanted to actually just go collect a paycheck and see how things go in the NFL, if not for NIL. Riley Mills is another person who falls into this category, another really good defensive lineman who we're going to, assuming he stays healthy, get a lot of production out of this year. Xavier Watts, arguably the top safety in all of college football coming back this year. And he fits the same mold as these other guys. Really productive, extremely productive at the college level. Not as highly touted by the NFL. And then Jack Kaiser too. So Jack Kaiser's one of those veteran players who doesn't necessarily pop off the charts physically, but he's really key to I would say the IQ of that defense. So he's someone who's going to be helping to make sure everyone's in the right spots, particularly the linebackers, making sure that we're making the right calls on defense. We're adjusting where we need to. And again, someone like that, very critical to the operation on the defensive side of the ball. So I think being able to retain all these guys, I don't know that we necessarily, maybe we would have, you never know. I mean, I think at Notre Dame in the past, there were players who are maybe a little bit more inclined to come back for another year than maybe you would find at some other places. People tend to really believe in the school and the program. So we have that working for us. But it's not a given that these guys would have all been back, I think, pre-NIL era. So yeah, I think that's a really big benefit for us. And as I mentioned, I don't know if they're all Americans, but they're going to do really well for us this year. And I think it takes our defensive trajectory, which starting from last year was a top 10 defense, and you bring all these guys back, another year in Al Golden's system, and you also have some other areas where you're hoping people will make a jump in play versus what they had last year. And I think you used the word giddy to describe your excitement going into this year. I think that's an apt word. I think for me, this is probably the most excited I've been about just a unit for Notre Dame, in quite some time.
Yeah, if I think about, just each level of the unit, is there a concern? And it's like, well, the front the front defensive line in the middle, Howard Mills, an All-American, a very above average starter, supplemented with RJ Oben, a proven edge rusher at the Power 5 level, and Jordan Botello, a very athletic, opposite edge rusher to RJ Oben. And then a bunch of depth behind them that I get. Gabriel Rubio sounds like he might be out the first month and a half of the season with an injury, but a ton of depth behind those guys. Linebacker anchored by Jack Kaiser and supported by two very high-end recruits that are now earning playing time. These aren't developmental projects. These are highly touted guys in Drake Bone and Jalen Sneed. And then the secondary littered with two All-Americans in Xavier Watts and Ben Morrison, and a bunch of guys that have either been knocking on the door for playing time at Notre Dame or starting elsewhere. Like, there's just not a weak spot. It's just, I stare at this and I'm like, you know what? I hate saying we can afford injuries, but I actually don't know how you replace Ben Morrison just because he might be the greatest cornerback in Notre Dame history. But I think everyone else, like, we could survive a couple injuries and I'd still be like, all right, my expectations haven't really changed. I just can't think of ever doing a preview where that's been the case. That's a perfect segment, though. I just can't talk about Ben Morrison enough. He's officially my favorite player on this Notre Dame roster. I am officially in love with talking about Ben Morrison than any other topic we've ever talked about on this show. And I'm just going to do it all year long because he's going to be a top 10 NFL draft pick. He's going to be gone from Notre Dame next year. And we get 12, hopefully 13, 14, 15 games to just appreciate Ben Morrison. And so season 4 of Guyers Talk is officially the Ben Morrison Appreciation Show. He gave up just 280 yards last year as the primary defender on completion. So every single pass that Notre Dame gives up, it gets slotted to someone as the primary defender. He gave up just 280 yards, just 3 touchdowns. It averaged out to 23 yards per game going up against their number 1 wide receiver. And these weren't joke number 1 wide receivers. That was going up against Ohio State, going up against Caleb Williams in USC, going up against some very, very highly touted offenses. Didn't matter. It just didn't matter. And he shut down everybody. And I get his interceptions dropped off. He had 6 as a freshman, only had 3 last year. That's just because people stopped throwing the ball in his direction. They were, screw it. Like, if Ben Morrison's on that side of the field, focus on the other half of the field. We're just not touching him. I mean, he is approaching Jalen Smith level hysteria of what this guy is for this defense. And what a luxury, especially in the college football game, to just say, you know what, we never need safety help. You know what, we never need to shade the nickel over there. Like, everyone else just focus on the other 10. We're going to play 10-on-10 football, and Ben's good. Like, just that luxury to then be able to send one more blitzer or send one more safety help or send one more guy down in the box for run protection and a 3rd and medium. Like, all those tough decisions a coordinator needs to make of, are they going to run? Are they going to pass? Are they going whatever Al Golden needs to be thinking about? He never needs to say, yeah, but I need to shade a guy to help Ben Morrison. And at such a critical position in the college game, so fun. I just can't wait to watch him wear a gold helmet, 12 plus more times in his career.
Just being able to leave, like you said, leaving a guy on an island like that just opens up things so much for the defense. You just don't have to stress about the number 1 receiver exposing you. Like you said, you can add an extra blitzer. You can make certain adjustments that you wouldn't be able to otherwise if you had to scheme around a weak cornerback. And we don't have a weak cornerback. We have one of the best in college football. This guy's, I would say the level of confidence I have in him going out, performing consistently is about the same as Julian Love. And this guy's he projects more highly at the NFL than Julian Love did. And granted, Julian Love seems to be carving out a pretty nice career for himself in the NFL. So maybe the NFL should have drafted him a little bit higher. But yeah, I think it's a testament to Mike Mickens. I mean, this is a cornerback room that when he took over was one of the weaker points, I would say, on the team.
Absolutely.
Like we had a knack. I would say we definitely had a knack for getting more out of our corners than you would expect given the talent that we were bringing in. And I think Julian Love's an example of that. But when Mickens took over, this was a team that was pretty bare, and we were removed from the Julian Love years. So the question was, is this going to be a position group that's going to be able to develop and take the step? And not even, I think at that time, I was just hoping that they would, become like an above average unit. Now they're one of the better units in the entire country. So just remarkable. And then the recruiting for corner has been on the upswing as well. So things are looking really good now for this year, but even looking forward, the trajectory is looking very strong. So I think you got to tip your cap to Mike Mickens. Hopefully we can continue to retain him because he's done an exceptional job with that room. Now I'm going to move on. We could talk about Ben Morrison in the secondary all day. And we're going to be talking about them quite a bit the rest of this year, I would expect. But I'm going to move on to just the transfers that I'm most excited about. I talked a little bit about the impact of NIL and retaining players who were key components last year. And then those guys, as you mentioned, Brett, there are different levels of the defense. So it was, and that's what you want to see. You want to see veteran experience at every level. Now, shifting to another key aspect of college football transfers, I want to talk about who I'm most excited about, and that's RJ Oben. So this is a guy who had 5 sacks a year ago. And that was despite being the best rusher on an under-talented Duke team. He was getting double teamed a lot. So I think that when you see that number of sacks, 5, it doesn't really like pop off the page as much. But anyone who watched that Duke team, it became immediately apparent that that was a very talented defensive line. That was a team that held its own against Notre Dame, and it was one of the plus units on a Duke, a strong Duke team that was, it was a good team until Riley Leonard got hurt, and then obviously things went a little sideways from there. But Oben was really the stalwart of that line, and so I think if you're looking for a lot of optimism with Oben, it's that, well, you bring this guy in who's a really good player, and he's going to be sitting next to guys like Howard Cross, Riley Mills, and you're not going to be able to double team RJ Oben. And I have a lot of confidence that he's going to be able to make some impact plays when he gets those matchups, which is going to happen pretty frequently. Now, because we're an analytical podcast and we have to tell you both. We have to tell you, the pros and the cons. One element here that could be a flag. I don't think it's a big deal, but Oben, he didn't generate a ton of pressures. We mentioned he got a lot of, I would say he got a lot of double teams, so that's part of it as well. He never had more than 30 in season, so you could have some concern there that maybe, it's like, is he getting enough pressure there? Like, what's going on there? But I think when you align him next to guys like I said, like a Howard Cross and a Riley Mills, and he's gonna be able to feast on these one-on-one matchups, and I think he's going to generate a lot of sacks and a lot of pressures.
Yeah, and the other two transfers, I think of particular note to just mention, Jordan Clark looks like he's edging towards breaking through the two deep and is going to get playing time, maybe at nickelback. Jordan Clark is the son of I'm going to forget first name, but Clark, the wider the secondary player for the Pittsburgh Steelers for a long time.
Ryan Clark.
He's Ryan Clark's kid. And then Rod Hurd coming in from Northwestern as a grad transfer as well. And what I really like about the transfers and the guys coming up, I'm going to get into maybe our next question on breakout player I'm most excited about. The guys we're supplementing on the defensive side of the ball are proven Power 5 starters. And I think that just gives you such a better floor. Like Rod Hurd was a starter for Northwestern on a very surprisingly pretty good defense for Northwestern last year when they had, the whole, Fitzgerald left and had like the coaching and the recruiting and the hazing and the just like everything that could have went wrong for Northwestern went wrong. Rod Hurd really stood out. Jordan Clark on a not so great Arizona State team, but he really stood out as a leader. RJ Oben stood out as a leader at Duke. So we're getting guys that are proven at the Power 5 level that I think just gives you a baseline expectation of, okay, they'll be solid. And the other guys we're talking about stepping up in terms of potential breakout players are pretty much across the board, very solid recruits who've waited in the wings, who are now ready to go. So this isn't, oh man, the 5-star, the 4-star wasn't developing and now the 3-star is getting a look, or, oh man, it's like that guy that got passed up a year ago by an underclassman. No, these are guys that are standing, behind Maris Leofau and JD Bertrand, or were frankly waiting in the wings on Cam Hart, who talk about a 1-2 punch with Ben Morrison, and now are going to get their shot. And so flipping on from transfers to those guys that have been waiting in the wings, who am I most excited about? I think there's 4 contenders that we should be talking about. It's Drake Bowen at middle linebacker, Jalen Sneed at the Rover, a bit of an undersized linebacker, comparisons to Jeremiah Wosu-Koromora. Did I get that right? I think I did. JOK.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's you could also say JOK.
JOK.
Karamoa. I mean, so you're close, but
All right.
not exactly.
I'm not taking a Malort shot. I'm not taking a Malort shot. Are we bringing that back? Hang on, time out. This is worth the side segment.
Well, we could talk about it right here. Let's just we're doing it live. We're doing it
live. Let's pause on breakout players for our listeners. Last year we counted the number of times one of us would butcher a name, and if you butcher the pronunciation, you would owe the other person a Malort shot, a Chicago special liqueur that I wouldn't recommend as your go-to beverage of choice, but it's certainly one of the favorites in our friend group. I just want to clarify, we can do that bet again. That did not count as a mispronunciation.
Yeah, it was close enough. I would say I'm not necessarily the judge, jury, and executioner, but if I were, I would tend to side with you on that one. But one element we could do, we should add on our video like a running, anytime there's a mistake, here comes up the running tally.
Yeah. We'll get the little tally going. Okay.
Yeah, the Malort logo. Yeah, we could do that.
Malort, not a sponsor, could be.
I mean, that's the dream, right?
That's the dream. I'm retiring from my day job the day that Malort sponsors Guyers Talk.
Oh yeah, we'll have a Malort tailgate at the college football playoff
Oh,
home game, right?
that'd be
Yeah.
intense. Okay.
Although I feel like I'd want to, I feel like I'd want to have my senses about me maybe a little bit more if we're having a, a home playoff game. That's not everyone's approach. That's usually my approach. But
Okay.
anyways, I think we're in agreement.
Okay, so that doesn't count as a shot, but the Malort counter will be back in play here for season 4. Okay, back on track. Breakout player. So Jalen Sneed, Drake Bowen, both going to be starting in that linebacker unit. Both solid 4-star recruits, around top 200 recruits in the country. And then the other guys that stand out to me are going to be in the secondary of who goes and gets that spot opposite of Ben Morrison. It sounds like there's a battle between Christian Gray and Jaden Mickey. Again, both highly touted recruits. Christian Gray was 205 in his class. Jaden Mickey was 214. The one I think I'm most excited about is Jalen Sneed. And he was number 42 recruit in his cycle, was Mr. South Carolina football out of the Hilton Head area. And everything about Jalen Sneed is like, all right, this guy has, could be running back or wide receiver speed at the NFL level, but instincts of Jalen Smith, JOK, like those are kind of the comparisons he's always gotten. And the knock was he's always had a hard time kind of reading defenses and picking up the nuances. And Al Golden has done a really great job of simplifying, go see your assignment and just go be fast, like go play into your strengths. And I also think there's an element that Jalen Sneed didn't break through because he was playing behind JD Bertrand, Maris Leofau, and Jack Kaiser, who were just seniors, gritty, experienced, like had been through it all, were trusted. And so I always took that to be less about Jalen Sneed and more just he was around two guys that took advantage of 5th and 6th year super seniors from COVID. And now is his chance to shine here as a redshirt sophomore, still 3 years of eligibility left. I just think he has the highest upside. If you said, who's the All-American on this team that we didn't see coming, it's Jalen Sneed. With all 4 of those guys that I mentioned, though, they're unproven. And do you need 1 or 2 of them to just be solid? Like, they don't have to be All-Americans. They don't have to be the best player on this team because we've got Jack Kaiser and Ben Morrison and Howard Cross and Xavier Watts. Like, we don't need them to be anything more than a really solid role player. I think of the guys that has the chance to be way more than that. Jalen Sneed circled on my list.
Yeah, I mean, it's just circling back to how great this defense is. It's experience, and then there's high end talent. It's just a great combination. You don't always have that. It's like the young players that we have that haven't, that maybe are ready to break out, very highly touted. And so I think for me, I'm going to go into some a breakout guy or two here that I'm excited about. But I think keeping with going back to linebacker, I think Kingston Villamu Asa. Hopefully, I pronounced that right. I feel pretty confident that I did,
Kev,
but we'll see.
Say it
But
again. Say it again.
I already said it once. I'm not
Okay.
gonna risk it
Okay.
again. Just in case.
We'll go back and check the film.
Yeah, because in the off chance I, for some reason, pronounced it a little bit differently than the first time, and I got it right the first time, then I'm just shooting myself in the foot.
I think it's Villamu Asa.
Yeah. Okay. Well, hey, we'll say it was close enough. I gave you one.
I'll give it to you.
Yeah, we're doing trades here. This is like we're just making little value trades back and forth. But this guy is a freshman, really highly touted. I think he was like top. I don't have the recruiting ranking in front of me, but I think he was a top 50 recruit overall. We're somewhere in that range. Maybe it was like top 70. Did really well in spring practice, and it's looking that we have a 5-man rotation.
42 overall in the country.
42.
Identical to Jalen Sneed, just 2 years behind.
Yeah, and this guy seems like a hit. It seems like he's going to be a really good player. Like, it seems like he picks up defensive concepts very quickly. It seems like the game is not too fast for him. And again, he's a true freshman. So already part of what's looking like a 5-man rotation at linebacker, which is also another great luxury to have, just to have a strong rotation of depth there. That'll really pay a lot of dividends as the season goes on. So I'm excited to see how he does this year. I think if you're looking at a breakout player as a freshman, I think that's really promising, for what to expect from him by the end of the year and also for years to come. And then I think kind of on the flip side of that, if I'm looking at a player who's been with the program for a while and is poised for a breakthrough, I think Jordan Patello is really interesting. Mm-hmm. This is a guy who always, I think from a physical profile, always jumped off the charts. I think it was always apparent that this is a guy who had some pretty impressive pass rushing abilities. But what held him back in the past was his maturity and also sometimes his ability to pick up certain defensive concepts. By all accounts, now he's matured quite a bit. He's very familiar with our defense, and I think if you're looking at players who finally, it finally clicks, right, and they finally make that big jump, I think this is a pretty good candidate for that. Some of the best Notre Dame teams in recent memory, we've had players like that. You really need it to happen, and so I think there's a good chance he's that person for us this year. So yeah, it's just exciting. Like talking about, I mean, look, we're talking about breakout players. Like we have like the experienced guys that are sure things and may improve even more. And then there's also a long list of breakout players. We have a really high floor. And then if a number of these people hit, I mean, the upside is I don't know, it's
Massive.
mouthwatering.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, the next question, the last one we had was, what happens if this unit takes a step back? Like, what is the downside case? And it honestly was really hard to come up with a scenario. I mean, I'll say it from a few different ways, but in the last, I'm looking at it, 7 years, Notre Dame has had a top 15 defense 5 times. And the 2 times we didn't, we were number 36 in SP Plus in 2022 and number 22 in 2019. So still overall really solid. And so, what leads to us taking a step back like, realistically we did in 2022. We did when we lost the game to Marshall, lost the game to Stanford, like just kind of didn't really show up and bring our best in Marcus Freeman's first year. And I think about that and like, that was a lot of execution by Marcus Freeman being a first time coach and just like not being prepared. And Al Golden, first time coordinator. And this is like, it was just kind of a lot of transition. But otherwise, like we've consistently been a top 15 unit and borderline top 10 more often than not. And this just has more depth, more experience, and more star power than any of those, and a really favorable schedule. If you go through quarterbacks on our schedule, I'm trying to think of the best quarterback we go up against, like Connor Wegman at Texas A&M, Haynes King at Georgia Tech, maybe Miller Moss at USC, like highly touted
Yeah.
guy. See how it pans out, but like maybe DJU at Florida State on his now third stop and lost all of his wide receiver weapons. Like we'll get to this in a preview on the schedule, but I think it's probably DJU or Miller Moss, and then I
Yeah.
guess Connor Wigman. Like it's hard actually finding offenses that we go up against where it's like, oh boy, like we might not be a top 10 defense because we've got to go up against this Ohio State squad, or we got to go up against Caleb Williams, or we got to go up against Des Ritter. It's kind of like, I just don't see a team with the caliber on their offense to really go and do damage against our defense. And I'm not saying that can't happen. I'm not saying first game of the season we don't go down to Texas A&M and offense is sputtering and puts the defense back against the wall. I'm not saying it can't happen in a game, but over the course of 12 games, I think the combination of depth, experience, and star power is unlike anything we've ever seen at Notre Dame. And I just can't think of it in terms of feeling that good going into a year. Like the 2012 defense became that, but we didn't know that going into 2012. This just feels like a Lou Holtz era defense where going in, gosh, we got one of the best units in the country. Like no one's going to be able to. Yeah, I would not be surprised if no one scores 30 points on this defense. I won't be surprised if no one gets to 24. Like I think if you're going to beat Notre Dame this year, you got to beat them in like a 21-17 ball game and shut down our offense. Like I just don't see teams, and I'm going to live to regret this. Here I am, like knock on wood, but like I just don't see a team going up against this defense unless if the injuries are cataclysmic, going up and putting up a bunch of points, let alone on a consistent basis.
Yeah. Look, you can trust Brett. He made the same recommendation to me in 2004 with the housing market. So just as confident. There is no way it's not a bad investment. No, but Brett, I'm with you on it. I think, look, I mean, also, I don't think we've talked about this point enough. I think it's also continuity with Al Golden. This is year 3, and he has a lot of players. This is where like continuity with the coaching staff combines with experienced, effective players with breakout potential players, right? It's just you're kind of hitting every single thing. And he's going to be able to explore more complicated concepts. He's going to be able to get more creative, with some of the plays that he's calling. And I think another element, this is a bit of a minor detail, but now we actually have in helmet communication. And so when you have
Hmm.
a guy who's really a quarterback of the defense like Jack Kaiser, I think something like that, that benefit is compounded a bit more, I think, for a team like Notre Dame, where we have all that, that veteran experience on the defensive side of the ball. So, and then also, a team like Michigan, they're not going to have the advantage of stealing signals anymore. So if we're looking
Connor
relative,
Stallions isn't on the
yeah,
sidelines.
if we're looking relatively across the college football landscape, some team like Michigan that maybe was looking a little bit better than us on the defensive side of the ball due to some juiced, stats from stealing signals, that doesn't exist anymore.
So what
So
you're telling me is with helmet technology to communicate, we wouldn't have 10 men on the field against Ohio State anymore. Like, thank goodness we solved that one. Perfect timing for a rule change. But yeah, I
yeah,
mean, just to wrap up this segment on the defense, we spent 30 minutes on the defense. We spent 60 minutes on the offense. And that's a function of where we have questions on this team, where we have transition, new players, unanswered pieces. And every single Notre Dame football fan should feel ecstatic about going into this year with what we have on the defensive side of the ball. That if we want to start getting into predictions, which I know we're a couple episodes away from, if you think that this is a year where Notre Dame not only makes the college football playoff, helps it's expanded from 4 teams to 12, but could actually go and make some noise and win a game, it's because I think against any team in the country, this defense will keep us in the game. I'm not saying we'd be favorites. I'm not saying we'd go out and beat them, but I think against any team in the country, this defense is going to keep you within a score. They're going to keep you within a 2 score. This isn't a situation where you're going to go and get burned for 40 plus points against Bama or Clemson in a big playoff game. This defense is just built to help this team contend. And if the offense matches that level, this could be a really special Notre Dame campaign.
Brett, where you peg, like if you had a pick ranking for the defense this year, where are you leaning? Are you leaning more top five?
Top three. Heard it here first.
Top,
I think
that's
it's a
yeah.
top three
I'm with you on.
unit with Georgia and pick one other of those other top teams like Oregon, Bama, etc.
Yeah,
If you want to go and talk about Alabama right now, they might feel great about their defensive pieces, but way more question marks of guys coming in. I think the only two other programs that can feel as good as we do about what we have proven coming back with experience, depth, and star power, it's Oregon and Michigan. I
Michigan.
think
Yep.
SP Plus has us as number 9. And I just think they are putting a lot more stock in transfers and new coordinators and just different pieces that I will take our defense over Michigan or Penn State or Alabama any day of the week. For what it's worth, 1-2 on their list is Ohio State and Iowa. I think Ohio State has a great defense coming back. I'll put us in that category of, call it Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon. I think we're right there with those defenses.
Yeah, I have us top five. I feel very comfortable saying top five, and I think we have a pretty good shot at top three. Look, if a lot of these breakout players that we're mentioning, if a lot of them hit, and I think a lot of them are, it's pretty apparent that they're going to hit to some extent already. But if some of these guys really surge, look, I think I'm not going to say we're going to be the number one defense, but I think if there were a year where we had a shot to try to take that mantle as the top defense in the country, I think this is a year where it could happen. I'm not saying it's likely, but I think it's on the table. And I'm now realizing that I have us as a top five defense, potentially top three, and then I picked our offense to be top 10. And I'm now kind of backing into like what that implies overall
Yeah.
for the team. And so maybe I'm a little maybe I'm being a little too optimistic on the offensive side of the ball. For the defense, I don't think I am. But sticking with my assumptions for offense and defense. Yeah, I mean, look, that's like a top five team right there easily. And we have more volatility on the offensive side of the ball, but I think the potential for this to be a year to remember, a year that we talk about 20 years from now. I think that's certainly on the table. That's something that I would not be surprised at all if we live up to that.
One last factoid. I'm looking at Bill Connolly's SP Plus preseason ratings. The top 4 are all Big Ten teams: Ohio State, Iowa, Michigan, and Penn State for ranking defenses. I don't know, like congrats, you get to go up against Iowa and Wisconsin and Minnesota offenses. Like I just think the Big Ten, offensively is maybe leaving a bit to be desired. Of course, the additions of
Yeah.
Oregon and USC might be two of the best offenses there, but again, I just think what we have coming back lets our defense go toe to toe. You heard me say top 3 defense on our last show. I said top 25 offense. I think that balances us out to a top 10 team, but more upside. I think there's more upside in our offense to go where you're saying as a top 10 offense than there is downside for our defense to slide back. So if the offense elevates, the defense goes and wins a game or two we maybe shouldn't. We're talking about real special things in South Bend come December.
Yeah. And I know this is the defensive episode, but I think one point I probably should have made in the offensive episode is I said top 10, but I do think it's more likely that we would be top 20 as opposed to top 5. So,
Absolutely. More
yeah,
downside than upside for sure.
right.
With that, we will come back for a quick recruiting update. We still got to cover the schedule, and then we'll be ready to go take on the Texas A&M Aggies in a preview. But a couple more overarching season preview episodes here for Gyrish Talk. Until then, Gyrish.
Irish.